You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. By going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, you can make this possible. Let's talk about St. Louis, folks, where a black police officer is speaking out about racial division in the police department. Officer Milton Green, folks, was shot by one of his co-workers 2 years ago. Green is black, and the person who shot him is white. Police Chief Lawrence O'Toole says it was friendly fire, but Green says it was racism and is filing a suit against the St. Louis Police Department. Now, folks, let me explain to you exactly what happened here. A guy had an accident. He was sitting here, then they were chasing him. Green hears it, grabs his gun badge. He yells, "I'm a cop." Cop tells him, "Put your gun down." Another cop comes along, while saying "put your gun down," shoots Green. He has since been on disability, has been unable to use his right arm. The white union raised money for the cop who shot him. Green says he has not gotten the kind of support he needs from the police department, and he says it's dead wrong. Now, the chief, of course, has disagreed with that. The question is, what happens now? Joining us now is Milton Green's attorney, Javad Zelli, and Redditt Hudson, founder of the National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice Reform and Accountability. First of all, I want to go to you, Javad. When you look at this story here, I mean, again, I've heard from many other black cops who said, man, the worst position I want to be in is when I'm not on duty or I'm not in uniform.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This is one of the most egregious cases I've ever seen. It's actually a little bit worse than the way that you described. Officer Green saw these two suspects. One of them pointed a gun at Officer Green. He pulled out his weapon that he's supposed to have on him all the time, pointed it at the guy. The guy ran away. All of a sudden, he's surrounded by other police officers. They tell him to get on the ground. He gets on the ground, puts his gun down, identifies himself as a police officer. The detective on the scene recognizes him, tells him to stand up. He stands up, calmly is talking to the detective with his badge in his hand. And mind you, this is Missouri. We have one of the most lax gun laws. You can have a gun, but he has his badge in his hand. All of a sudden, another cop shows up late and just looks at Milton, immediately yells, "Put down your gun," and shoots him, hitting him in his arm, ending his career. Now we're 2 years after this has happened, and Milton's disability payments haven't even been adjudicated yet. His house is in foreclosure. You know, he's basically losing everything because the city is not supporting him.
And what's crazy here is, again, a police department not owning up to it. The cop who shot him, any charges filed against him?
No charges filed against him. We did learn this week when we filed the lawsuit, and we served it on the police department. They came back and they rejected the lawsuit because they've told us that he no longer works for the police department. We've been told that it has nothing to do with Officer Green's case, that he's just not there anymore.
Wow. Redditt Hudson, again, we hear this from a lot of black police officers who say they are scared to death when they have to be on the other end of the barrel of a gun by another cop.
Man, Roland, you have black officers who are scared to be on duty now with some of their fellow officers. As I think you referenced earlier on social media, one of my colleagues who's a police officer with St. Louis City right now, Detective Heather Taylor, is the president of the Ethical Society of Police Officers, which is a predominantly black police officers association, one of the better black municipal police officers associations in the country. You have officers online posting things like they hope she bleeds to death because she's consistently called for accountability among police officers on that department. And the fact that that officer is no longer with the department, I guarantee you he left voluntarily. He wasn't forced out. One of the points of emphasis in a case like this that I would like to make, especially for officers around the country, is this union. The St. Louis Police Officers Association is a union of police officers that did not back Milton Green in this situation. They did back the guy who shot him in this situation. There was another officer, black officer, Luther Hall, who was beaten unmercifully by 4 white officers here in St. Louis City at a protest during the Jason Stockley verdict. If you remember that, there were protests following the not guilty verdict for Jason Stockley, who was the officer who announced the murder of a black man and then carried it out, almost execution style. Beat Luther Hall within an inch of his life. That police officers union offered him no support. So to those officers around the country, black officers who belong to these unions, man, stop giving your money to these unions that will do nothing for you and won't represent your interests or your community's interests at any time and will always stand against you. Witness the union in Cleveland now that fought for the officer that killed Tamir Rice to get his job back.
Javad, your client, Milton Green, still can't use his right arm?
He cannot. He can't hold a gun. I mean, he can use his hand, but when he shows it, he can't fully squeeze. He actually has to do workouts with a soup can right now. He can't properly hold a gun and fire it. He would be a liability to himself if he were on the streets. He hasn't been back to work since the incident occurred, and tomorrow will be the 2-year anniversary of that. And to talk about the Stockley cases, we actually represent about 16 people that were beaten the same night that Officer Hall was beaten. And the police department's position seems to be, did I lose?
No, you're there. Go ahead.
Okay, good. The police's position seems to be that the 120 people that they beat and pepper sprayed that night, that was lawful. But randomly, the only person that they made a mistake on was the one undercover police officer who happened to be black. The night that Milton was shot, he came in, he was rushed with a officer down call, was rushed to the hospital. The acting police chief and the person who's the current police chief both met with Milton. He told them what happened. He said everything was calm. You know, the perps were gone. And then this guy shot me. About a half hour later, the acting police chief goes out and gives a press conference and states that Milton was shot in a crossfire. An absolute lie. That white police chief is now suing St. Louis, claiming racial discrimination because he wasn't promoted to the full-time position.
Wow.
Roland,
go ahead, Redditt.
None of this should be disconnected from the recent exposure that officers all over the country, including officers in Philadelphia, St. Louis, and Phoenix, got for their social media posts identifying themselves as either affiliated or sympathizers with white supremacist organizations that hold white supremacist and racist views. There are any number of officers on our streets as we speak that police according to those ideologies, and it's reflected in the way that they treat us. And we've seen it time and time again. Now is the time to hold officers accountable. It's not time for sensitivity training, none of that. Punishment is the order of the day. If you want to change police culture, you have to start holding people accountable.
And what you're speaking about, of course, we had the Plainview Project, a database produced by Philadelphia attorney Emily Baker White. We had her on the show. And what you're talking about is more than a dozen police officers under investigation in St. Louis for a series of racist social media posts, some of them around the time Green was shot. In addition to that, you also have 72 cops pulled off of the streets in Philadelphia and placed on administrative duty as a result. And I'm sorry, in St. Louis, 22 cops have been barred from bringing their cases to the circuit attorney's office. Last question for both of you, Javad. The point that we keep making, we keep hearing, oh, you know, it's a few bad apples. But what we're seeing fundamentally is we have fundamental issues in police departments, unions that protect them, and politicians are afraid to go against these police unions.
So I was a federal prosecutor back in a former life, and I wasn't even born in America. And I really love American idioms. And every time I hear that idiom, it's a few bad apples, I always ask people, what's the next part of that phrase? And that's the bad apples spoil the bunch. When other officers watch this, allow this to happen, and then come out and say that the people who do bad things are actually the heroes, that makes a lot of people question them. Milton has talked publicly that other officers went online and criticized him for what he did. They said that he was being a fool. He deserved what he got. You know, why is he asking for handouts? He says that his kids, who were raised in a house with a police officer, now, when they see other officers, they generationally are now afraid of these officers. Until we have real systematic changes with the way that the St. Louis Police Department polices, you can't expect the citizens to trust them. And the real irony is that was Milton's job. He was a community resources officer. It was his job to mend bridges between the police department and the community. And now he's seen what the police department has done and how they've abandoned him.
Redditt?
Black officers, wake up, man. A police officer will shoot you, disable you, and then have his colleagues question why you're looking for handouts. What we need now is leadership. We have that opportunity here in St. Louis. We have a black chief of police. We have a black public safety director. We need them to stand in the cut, man, and make a stand against these kinds of systemic abuses that reflect the racism that's at the foundation of police culture, not just here in St. Louis, but all over the country. And until we get that and hold some of these people accountable, we're going to see what we see. But I always say, as you know, Roland, I think it starts from inside. We need a critical mass of us inside the system ready to address these issues head on.
Absolutely. Javad Zelli, Milton Green's attorney. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Redditt Hudson, thanks for joining us as well.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. All right, folks, they're back. MarijuanaStock.org is another great investment opportunity. If you were lucky enough to invest in their last crowdfunding campaign, you know they raised a ton of money in just a few months investing in legal marijuana farms. Those initial investors now own shares of a publicly traded company, and they are on fire. Now they have a new investment opportunity that is as good, if not even better, than the last one. I'm talking about industrial hemp CBD. For those who don't know, the hemp plant is the cousin to marijuana with a much higher concentration of CBD, which means hemp CBD gives you all the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Until recently, hemp farming was practically illegal in the U.S. and heavily regulated by the DEA. However, the 2018 Farm Bill changed all of that, making it legal to grow hemp CBD in the U.S. and creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. They need land to grow all the plants. Now, this makes for an incredible investment opportunity, and that's where our good friends at 420 Real Estate come in. Their business model is simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed, high-paying tenants. That's right, they are hemp CBD landlords, and you can get in on the action. You can invest in the crowdfunding campaign for as little as $200 up to $10,000. Like I said, you don't want to miss out on this. To invest, go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org. And yes, this is a black-owned company, so you want to try it and get in the game. Back